Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. One of the surprises of the 2016 election was Donald Trump's victory in Michigan, one of several blue wall states where he achieved victory. After losing the state in 2020, he once again achieved victory in Michigan this year. Local correspondent Matthew Handley tells us more about this and has the latest on the statewide races. Matthew, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, Marcus. I am doing well. Thank you.
So, were we surprised when Trump took Michigan? It wasn't by a tremendous majority. I was tracking the entire race through the night, but it was sufficient enough that it was clear he had Michigan this time.
Yeah, it's definitely clear. It was called earlier today. I didn't see it called last night, but most of the outlets now have it called. As of now, it looks like he's up by about 70,000 votes over Kamala Harris here in Michigan. That's a bigger margin than what he lost by last go around, which is important to point out. I also want to point out something else that we've talked to, and we could talk a little bit more about this as well. There was worry that you'd have third-party candidates be spoilers here in the state for Kamala Harris, and that very well could have been the case. I did the math this morning, and it has since updated that we have over 80,000 people in Michigan that voted for a third-party candidate, which absolutely, if those votes had gone towards Kamala Harris, would have flipped the state in her direction. The Detroit News even reported this afternoon that Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck, all majority Muslim cities, went for Donald Trump as opposed to Kamala Harris.
They were trending that way during the campaigning. It became very clear that a lot of what he spoke for, especially with regard to his position on putting a stop to the conflict in the Middle East, was something that greatly appealed to not just their sentiments, but what was important to them.
Yes, and it appeared and part of this was part of Harris's campaign problem was, as it came out in the final days of the campaign, she was putting out two different messages depending on who she was talking to. To Jews in Pennsylvania, she was talking about how she was going to support Israel and make sure Israel has a right to defend itself. But when she came to Detroit and talked to leaders here, she had a different message, talking more about ending the war in Gaza, like you just mentioned, making sure there's peace in the Middle East. And I think that was a driver here, one, she appears to be two-faced on that side, but also that she didn't appear to take the Muslim vote very seriously, or perhaps even took it for granted. Although if we think back to the primary, we did have a significant amount of, back when it was Joe Biden running for president, we did have a significant amount of people in those communities vote uncommitted on the Democratic side, in part because they were frustrated with the Biden administration's handling of the conflict as well.
Yeah, and it's very clear that as far as campaigning was concerned, like you said, she didn't take certain demographics very seriously. She didn't take the Catholic vote seriously. She didn't take the Jewish vote seriously. And in this case, the Muslim vote. There was a very decided targeting of the women, especially the single women vote in the United States. And unfortunately, that didn't bode well, as we saw in yesterday's electoral results. No,
you saw them really took that gamble on the abortion issue. I heard Michael New before talking about some of the pro-life victories that happened, in particular in Florida. They really took a gamble on that. And Democrats in general took a gamble on that, not just in the presidential race, but in the state races as well. And I can think of here where I live in Upper Michigan and Northern Michigan, you had a race that was very close that helped flip the Michigan State House towards Republicans, where we now have the former TV weatherman Carl Bonack beat the incumbent Democrat Jen Hill. She was putting out flyers this entire election talking about how Carl Bonack was going to go to Lansing and restrict abortion rights. Well, we just had that referendum 2 years ago about having abortion in our Constitution, and I don't think people were taking that seriously, that would even be an issue here in Michigan right now, given the way we voted back on Proposal 3 in 2022. So that gamble clearly did not pay off for her, Kamala Harris, or for Democrats, particularly in state elections here in Michigan as well.
Let's expand the conversation just a tad to talk about the quote-unquote blue wall. You would consider these battleground states to some degree, but they typically leaned blue. And yet yesterday we saw Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. All three wound up going for Trump. So that move there at the lowest level signifies that there are certain things about Trump's, anywhere from policies to appeal, speak to what a lot of the demographic in those states are looking for.
Yeah, you got to think about, too, that in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin and Michigan in particular, where we've had a lot of people leave the state over the past 20 years and move to other states, in part for better economic opportunities, it's left us with a much more working class a group of people living here that actively vote. And that's where Trump is able to get ahead in front of Kamala Harris. As much as I may not like his demeanor, the things he says, he can come off and appear as, quote unquote, one of the guys, someone that you can get along with. And that appeals to a lot of people. I think that appeals to, I'd really love to see how the auto workers in general voted, as opposed to how their union was telling them to vote. That appeals to a lot of people. And I want to point out, too, I really do think this is in part a referendum on Harris and not necessarily Democrats as a whole. So Harris lost in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, Wisconsin, as you mentioned. But as was called this afternoon and earlier this morning, you had a Democrat, Tammy Baldwin, keep her Senate seat in Wisconsin. Right. You had Alyssa Slotkin narrowly beat Mike Rogers here in Michigan. So you still have Democratic victories in some of these states, and it's clear that at the top of the ticket, Democrats were not happy with having Kamala Harris there. And as I believe I mentioned this morning on Michigan Mornings, Michigan's a must-win for Democrats. No Democrat has won the White House without Michigan since Jimmy Carter in 1976. So if she's going to lose Michigan, if Democrats are going to lose Michigan, right now it's a bellwether they're not going to win the White House. Exactly.
And the last time Trump won it was after 6 consecutive presidential elections wherein the entire state had gone Democrat, which proves to us that swing was so pivotal to that victory. And clearly that was the case yesterday as well, albeit it wasn't Michigan that sealed the deal for him. It was Pennsylvania. It was a toss-up there and had to do with how quickly votes were being tallied. But as far as Trump's policies go, and like you mentioned, appealing to the working class, appealing to being one of the guys, anywhere from his tax proposals to creating avenues that would benefit the middle class, it's clear that the working class is seeing that they need a change. And what has happened in the past 4 years was not appealing to them.
Yeah, you see that as well. As I mentioned, in some of the other state races, you have the Republicans have taken back control of the Michigan House, so we will not have a total Democratic government anymore. In addition to that, Republicans widely won on the State Board of Education as well as local education boards here in Michigan. One other place where that didn't necessarily happen was on the Supreme Court here in Michigan as well. The 2 candidates that were endorsed by the Democratic Party and who are not, I repeat, not endorsed by Right to Life of Michigan appear to have won those seats on the state Supreme Court. Bit of a disappointment there for the life issue that I was hoping we might even see some challenges to Proposal 3 if we had the Right to Life candidates on there, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But we've got a lot of changing demographics in Michigan. You know, I lived in Grand Rapids and Kent County for a while. When I first moved there, it was solidly Republican, and as more people have moved into that area, as the colleges in that area have grown and have gotten increasingly more progressive, unfortunately, including my alma mater, you've seen that county switch from a Republican bastion where you have the DeVos family running a lot of the politics there to being a much more blue county, which is why you saw Harris and Trump both campaigning there so much, including Trump ending his campaign there on Tuesday morning.
Yep, that's right. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he stayed there till almost 3 a.m. before catching a flight to Florida.
Yes.
I mean, talk about driving yourself into exhaustion on the night of election and having to stay up and wait for the results to come out.
Yeah, and I was exhausted just staying up early this morning to make sure I had the most accurate information for Michigan Mornings. But hey, that's why we did it. We were here to make sure everyone was ready when they got up with the best information we got.
That's true, brother. I did the same thing. We should have been texting each other. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Marcus.
My guest, Matthew Handley, he is a member of the team of Ave Maria Radio, and we've been talking about Trump taking back Michigan and what that means. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.